Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Arthur Davies, and I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 28 years old. Before the war, my world was measured in semesters and punctuated by the ringing of a school bell. It smelled of chalk dust, old paper, and the rain on the slate roofs of Cardiff. I was a teacher. I believed in the quiet power of a well-formed sentence, the unshakable logic of a historical timeline. I believed that any problem, any confusion could be untangled with patience and clear explanation. You see, I thought the world was a text, a complex one to be sure, but one that could be read, understood, and improved upon. The war. The war taught me that some texts are written in fire, and you only get one chance to read them correctly. People often wonder how a man goes from teaching boys about the Roman Empire to fighting in its ruins. They imagine a grand, patriotic moment. But for me, it was a quiet, cold decision made in a staff room, listening to the wireless crackle with news of fallen libraries and burned books. I went to war to protect the very idea of a classroom, a place where thought could be free. But what does a teacher do when the lesson is pure, unthinking chaos? When the classroom is a steel box on a beach and the only subject is staying alive for the next 5 seconds? I remember the smell of the troopship, 1,000 men smelling of sweat, fear, and cheap tobacco. And beneath it all, the clean, sharp scent of the sea. I taught boys about the Mediterranean, showed them maps of its clear blue waters, told them stories of Odysseus and Aeneas. The reality was a churning, gray-green nausea that promised nothing but violence. We were off the coast of Italy, Salerno, a name that meant nothing to me then. It means everything to me now. The final briefing was a blur. Maps, coordinates, objectives. They were just lines and numbers, abstract concepts like a geometry problem. Then came the order, saddle up, and the abstraction ended. The world shrank to the inside of our Sherman tank. A world of steel, oil, and the faces of 4 other men you trusted with your life. There was Sergeant Miller, our commander, a man whose jaw seemed to be permanently clenched. There was Corporal Jones on the main gun, a boy from Swansea who was younger than some of the students I'd taught. And our driver, Private Shaw, who chewed his lips so hard it was always raw. I was the loader. My job was simple. Feed the gun, take a 75mm shell, shove it into the breech, and wait for the thunder. The ramp of the landing craft slammed down, and the world outside the viewing slit went from gray steel to a nightmare of white sand and black smoke. It wasn't a sound, it was a physical blow. A concussion of noise that hit you in the chest and rattled the teeth in your skull. Machine guns chattering like monstrous insects, the deep, gut-wrenching crump asterisk of mortars, and the high, terrifying whistle of shells that you knew were meant just for you. Shaw gave it the gun, and the Sherman lurched forward off the ramp and into the surf. The water churned around us, hissing against the hot steel. We were moving. For a moment there was hope, then came the lurch. A hideous grinding shudder that vibrated through the floor plates up my spine. The engine screamed, a high, impotent whine. The track spun, digging us deeper. We were stuck, bogged down in the wet sand, halfway between the sea and the dunes. A perfect stationary target, the classroom had become a coffin. Sergeant Miller's voice was a harsh rasp over the intercom. "Shaw, what's happening?" "She's not moving, Sarge." Dug in deep. The first round hit us then. Not a shell, but something smaller. Anti-tank rifle, probably. It didn't penetrate. It just struck the turret with a deafening asterisk clang that felt like a blacksmith's hammer swinging against my own head. The inside of the tank filled with the acrid smell of hot metal and ozone from the spalling. Another hit, and another. They had us ranged. We were a sitting duck, a big steel tortoise waiting for the butcher. Through my narrow slit, I saw them. An infantry platoon, lads from a London regiment, moving up the beach to our right. They were using our crippled tank as cover, trying to advance towards a ruined stone farmhouse on a low rise. They were disciplined, moving in short dashes, dropping to the sand, but something was wrong. They weren't making progress. Men were going down, not in the theatrical way you see in films. They just crumpled. They'd be running and then they'd be a heap on the sand. No sound, just a sudden awful stillness. "Machine gun," Miller spat. "Somewhere in that farmhouse. Jones, can you see it?" "Negative, Sarge. Too much smoke." "I can't get a beat on it." Jones's voice was high, cracking with panic. He was just a boy asked to do an impossible thing in an impossible place. My teacher's mind, the part of me that was supposed to be useless here, started working. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was instinct, the instinct to find order in chaos, to observe, to analyze, to solve the problem. I pressed my face to my own viewing slit, ignoring the shiver of fear that told me a bullet could find this tiny opening. I looked past the smoke, past the running men. I looked at the farmhouse. It was an old building, probably stood there when Garibaldi was unifying this country. Stone walls, a collapsed tile roof, a perfect defensive position. The German firing was disciplined, short, controlled bursts, an MG-42 by the sound of it, a terrible weapon, but the gunner was making a mistake, a small one. Every time he fired, a little puff of dust and stone chips kicked up from the wall just below a narrow window slit. It was barely visible, a tiny detail in a canvas of pandemonium. And then I saw it, the map. Not the tactical map from the briefing, but the map in my head, the one I'd built over years of teaching geography and history. I knew this landscape, or ones like it, the way the land folded. The way a farmer would build a house to shelter it from the wind, to give it a commanding view of his fields. That farmhouse wasn't just a random ruin, it was positioned deliberately. And that window wasn't just a window. It was a firing port, perfectly placed to command the entire sweep of the beach. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the classroom calm, the feeling you get when you see the solution to a difficult equation before anyone else does. The external noise faded into a dull roar. The immediate world became the interior of the turret and the terrified face of Corporal Jones. I switched my intercom. "Jones, Evans," I said, using his first name. My voice sounded unnaturally steady in the din. "Listen to me, Evans, just listen to my voice." He looked over, his eyes wide. "I can't see it, Arthur, I can't see the bloody thing." "You will," I said. "We're going to do this like a lesson." "All right, first traverse the turret right, slowly, that's it." I became a teacher again. My words were my chalk, the target was the blackboard. "Stop, now do you see the farmhouse?" "Yes." His voice was a bare whisper. "Good. Look at the left side of it. There's a collapsed section of roof, a dark triangle, do you see it?" He was breathing in ragged gasps, but he was listening. I see it." "Excellent. Now move your eyes down from the point of that triangle. To the main wall, there's a dark slit like a missing stone. It's no bigger than a shoebox. It's in shadow." A burst of machine gun fire ripped across the sand outside, and another infantryman fell. Jones flinched. "Stay with me, Evans," I said, my voice firm but not loud. "Find the shadow, find the slit. That is your target. Put a high-explosive round right in that shoebox." I could see his hands on the controls, slick with sweat. He was trying to steady the gun. The tank rocked as another round glanced off us. "I'm on it," he whispered. "I think I'm on it." "Then fire," I said, my voice as calm as if I were asking him to read a passage from a book. He fired. The 75mm gun roared. The tank bucked, filling with smoke and the smell of cordite. For a heartbeat, the world was just that sound, that smell. I shoved another shell into the hot, slick breech out of pure muscle memory. I was already looking back out my slit. The shot was perfect. It hit the wall just below the slit. The high-explosive charge blew a huge chunk of ancient stone inward. Dust and smoke billowed out of the opening. And then, silence. The MG-42 stopped firing, just like that. The chatter that had dominated the world for an eternity was gone. In the sudden quiet, I could hear the sea again. The shouts of men, not screams of pain, but shouts of purpose. The pinned-down infantry were up. They were moving, running towards the farmhouse, taking advantage of the silence we had bought them. Inside our steel box, no one spoke. The only sound was the ragged breathing of 5 men. Sergeant Miller's voice came over the intercom, quiet, full of a kind of awe. "Good lesson, Professor." I didn't feel like a professor. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt hollowed out. A jarring memory surfaced, a school trip to Caerleon, showing the boys the ruins of the Roman barracks. I'd spoken about the legions, about the order they brought. Now I had just used a piece of that same history, a farmer's stone legacy, as a target for a high-explosive shell. I had used my skill for teaching, for building understanding, to guide a boy's hand in the art of destruction. We sat there in our metal tomb on that Italian beach, and I understood. The war wouldn't just break buildings and bodies. It would break ideas. It would take the best parts of you, the things you were proud of, your knowledge, your patience, your clarity of thought, and it would turn them into weapons. I returned to the classroom after the war. I tried to pick up where I left off, but the chalk always felt a little heavier in my hand. I would stand in front of those young, hopeful faces, talking about the architectural genius of Rome or the poetry of Wilfred Owen, and my mind would drift back to that beach. I could smell the cordite and the salt. I could see Corporal Jones's pale, terrified face lit by the dim instrument panels. How do you teach a boy about the beauty of civilization when you carry the memory of using its ruins as a targeting marker? You can't, not really. You just do your best. You hope that the lessons of peace are stronger than the lessons of war. The hardest lesson I ever learned wasn't in any book. It came to me in the ringing silence after our gun fired. It's that knowledge is not righteous. It is simply a tool, as neutral as a hammer or a spade. You can use it to build a cathedral or to knock it down. You can use it to open a mind, or you can use it to sight a gun. The true test of a man, the true test of a whole civilization, is what he chooses to do with that knowledge when the shells start falling. This memory is a piece of shrapnel I carry. It's heavy. Help me carry it. Subscribe and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.